My name is Harper Price, and I never thought I'd become the kind of woman who tells her life story from a motel room. But here I am, sitting on a stiff mattress, holding a paper cup of weak coffee, trying to make sense of how everything I built, gave, and believed in turned into something I no longer recognized. It all changed with a single sentence from my son. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry, he just said it as if he were telling me they were out of orange juice. "Mum, this isn't working anymore. We don't have space for you." I looked him straight in the eyes, nodded once, and walked out. I didn't ask why. I didn't cry. I didn't pack in a flurry or slam any doors. I just moved slowly, quietly, like someone who already knew there was nothing left to fight for. He didn't know I owned half the house. He didn't know my name was still on the deed, sitting right next to his in blue ink. He thought I was just extra, like clutter that builds up until someone finally gets fed up and takes a trash bag to it. But I wasn't trash. I was the reason that house even existed. The down payment had come from me, my entire retirement fund. And all I ever asked for in return was a place to sit at the table. I didn't need a bedroom with a view or a private bathroom or even my name on the mailbox. I just wanted to feel like I still mattered, that I wasn't being tolerated, that I hadn't become a burden in the very space I helped build. When I moved in, I brought 2 suitcases, a framed photo of my late husband Richard, and a folded quilt that still smelled like our old house in Baltimore. That was it. I didn't take up space, I didn't make noise, but somewhere along the way, just existing became too much for them. So I left. I ordered a cab from the driveway and waited in silence while my son stood at the kitchen window, pretending not to see me. I didn't wave goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just left. The only sound in the car was the hum of the engine and the quiet crinkle of the red folder I held in my lap. The folder with the house deed, tucked between utility receipts and a copy of my birth certificate. He had forgotten about it. Or maybe he never cared to remember. Either way, he was about to learn something I had already accepted. When people show you they have no room for you, believe them. But don't just walk away empty-handed. Take your name, take your worth, take your power with you. Because silence doesn't mean surrender. It can mean strategy. And sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't a scream or a slam of a door. It's a calm smile and a signature line on a legal document. That was the day everything changed. Not because I got thrown out, but because, for the first time in years, I didn't try to fix it. I didn't beg to stay. I just let them choose. And I walked away knowing something they didn't. That the foundation they had built their life on was mine too. And it was already beginning to crack. After Richard passed, the world felt too quiet. I went from hearing his soft humming in the kitchen and the way he cleared his throat before speaking to nothing but refrigerator hum and creaking floorboards. We had been married 37 years. He was steady, patient, and good with numbers. He left behind a life insurance policy, something he set up before retirement because he always planned for what might come. When it paid out, it came to $180,000, enough to start over, or enough to give someone else a start. Josh was the only child we ever had. I'd raised him with both softness and structure. He'd married Emily just a year before, and they were trying to buy a home in the suburbs outside Raleigh. The market was brutal. They had modest savings and pre-approval, but came up short when the final lender pulled their offer. They were heartbroken. Josh called me late one night, voice cracking, saying they'd found the perfect house but needed help to make it happen. I didn't even hesitate. I wired the full amount the next morning. He told me I saved their dream. Emily cried and hugged me like a daughter might. They both promised I'd always have a place with them. I wasn't planning on moving in then. I just wanted to help. But a few months later, after a minor surgery, things at my apartment felt harder. The stairs, the grocery bags, the loneliness. Josh offered to have me stay temporarily. Said the house had a finished basement, a little guest suite that would be perfect. It felt warm. I said yes. When I arrived, they had painted the room. There was a small twin bed with a new quilt and a potted fern in the corner. Josh said it was just until I got my energy back. Emily brought me tea that first night and showed me how the Nest thermostat worked. I felt like I'd walked into one of those cozy family commercials where everything smelled like cinnamon and new beginnings. I didn't expect luxury, I just wanted company. For the first few weeks, it was lovely. We had dinner together 3 times a week. Josh would make pancakes on Saturdays, something he used to do with his dad. Emily and I watched a baking show together, and she even laughed when I mispronounced the name of some French pastry. I felt useful again. I folded towels, ran errands, and baked cookies when they were both working late. There was a rhythm to the house that made me feel like I belonged. But slowly, things shifted. Emily started sighing more often when I asked simple questions. Josh stopped inviting me to their dinners and said they were busy with work stuff. The upstairs fridge got a lock, supposedly because they were meal prepping for a cleanse. One afternoon, I heard Emily on the phone saying how hard it was living with 2 kids and a mother-in-law. I laughed, thinking she meant it as a joke, until I heard the silence that followed. I began to feel the change in little things. The way they stopped asking me to join their plans. They paused when I walked into a room. The jokes turned sharper. The warmth dimmed. I started eating alone, not because anyone told me to, but because no one asked me to join. I once offered to put up a shelf in the laundry room and Josh just grunted, said maybe later. That shelf never went up. Still, I told myself families go through phases. Maybe they were stressed. Maybe I was overthinking. I clung to the promise they made, that I would always have a home with them. I repeated it like a prayer whenever I heard Emily say she needed more space, or when I found my clothes pushed to the side in the laundry basket. I reminded myself I had signed the papers to co-own the home, not because I wanted leverage, but because the mortgage needed a second name. I never imagined I'd need that paper to protect myself. But the cracks kept spreading, and the more I tried to make myself smaller, the more invisible I became. Until one morning, the invisibility was confirmed. There was no more room, not just in the house, but in their hearts, and all the warmth I thought we shared turned into a memory I couldn't trust. The first thing I noticed was the fridge. One afternoon I went to grab some yogurt and saw a silver padlock clamped across the handles. It wasn't subtle. Emily told me it was because they were meal prepping and didn't want things thrown off. She smiled when she said it, but it didn't reach her eyes. I nodded, like it made sense, but something inside me shifted. That fridge used to be a place where I left them notes, tucked in extra snacks and made little surprises. Now it was locked, like I didn't belong there anymore. Next came the modem. One morning, my TV stopped loading Netflix. The signal just spun, buffering endlessly. I asked Josh if the Wi-Fi was down, and he said it must be a glitch. Later that night, I found out he'd moved the modem to the upstairs office. When I asked about it, Emily said they needed a stronger signal up there for work. She added that if I needed help, I should really try writing things down so I wouldn't forget how to fix them. I smiled, just like I always did when things started to hurt. The living room used to be our shared space. I watched the news there while folding laundry or crocheting small projects. One day, my yarn basket vanished. I found it in the garage, stuffed in a bin labelled Donate. Emily said it must have been a mix-up during their weekend cleanup. I believed her because I wanted to, but the bin was closed with tape, like they'd already decided I wouldn't notice. Then came the comments, little jokes during dinner when they actually invited me. Emily would laugh and say she felt like she had 3 kids, not 2. Josh would groan if I mentioned changing something small in the house, like adding a shelf or moving a chair. He once muttered under his breath that the place was starting to look like a grandma's attic. I told myself they didn't mean anything by it, that they were just tired or stressed. They stopped telling me their plans. I'd find out about weekend trips from the silence of the house. I'd wake up to a note on the fridge saying they'd be back Monday, and the guest suite suddenly felt like an afterthought. I began to shrink myself. I'd time my showers so they wouldn't hear the water running. I stopped using the kitchen after 6 p.m. I ate small meals in my room, cleaned up without a tray. I started folding my clothes inside my suitcase instead of the laundry room. I convinced myself it was just easier that way. Even when I overheard Emily tell her friend on the phone that this situation wasn't sustainable, I stayed quiet. She called me sweet. But she also said she wanted her life back, as if I were holding it hostage. Josh once told her I'd never leave if they kept being nice. He didn't know I was standing on the other side of the wall when he said it. I stood there, staring at the wallpaper I had helped them pick out from the catalogue. There was a part of me that still hoped it would pass, that if I just kept the peace, things would settle. I didn't want to be the problem. I didn't want to be the reason anything fell apart. So I folded their laundry. I wiped down the counters after they went to bed. I left kind notes on the kitchen island and smiled through the silence. But silence has a sound when it lingers too long. It starts to echo in your chest, and eventually you realize you've been the only one trying to hold something together that's already gone. It happened on a Tuesday morning, just after I'd finished washing a bowl of strawberries. I was still in my robe, standing barefoot in the kitchen, when Emily walked in. Her arms were folded tight across her chest, and her face was careful, too careful, like she'd rehearsed what she was about to say. She didn't look at me, just stared at the floor and spoke in that overly calm tone people use when they're trying to sound kind while delivering a blow. She said they'd been talking. Those things had gotten complicated. Maybe I'd be more comfortable in a place of my own. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like handing me a gift, a place of my own. I remember wiping my hands on a dish towel, slowly, deliberately. Josh walked in a moment later, holding his coffee like it was just another morning, like nothing was out of place. He nodded once and told me they didn't have space for me anymore. She nodded once and told me they didn't have space for me anymore. That was it. No lead-up, no apology, just the final line in a chapter I hadn't even realized was ending. I looked at both of them, and I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stood there for a second, then said, "Okay." Not loud, not bitter. Just quiet and even, like a closing door. I turned and walked back to my room without another word. The air felt colder somehow, as if the house itself had decided I no longer belonged. I pulled out my suitcase from under the bed and started packing. It didn't take long. A few dresses, my reading glasses, the quilt from our old home. The photo of Richard is in a wooden frame, and the red folder I had buried beneath my sweaters. The one they had forgotten existed. The one with my name beside Josh's on the house deed. I didn't rush. I folded everything neatly, taking care with each item like it deserved more respect than I'd been given. I didn't leave anything behind. Not a single pair of socks or sticky note. When I zipped the bag closed, it felt final, like drawing a line in the sand. I looked around the room one last time. It wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it never had been. I ordered a cab and waited on the curb with my bags at my feet. No one came outside. No one offered to help. Josh stood at the upstairs window and watched without moving. Emily didn't appear at all. The car pulled up and I got in, nodding politely to the driver. I didn't look back, not once. As we drove away, I held the red folder on my lap like a shield. I didn't feel angry, not yet, just hollow. But deep inside that quiet space, something settled. A knowing that this wasn't the end of the story, not for me. I had left their house, yes, but I hadn't left without power. I hadn't left without options. They had counted on me folding, on my disappearance without resistance. They thought kindness meant weakness. They didn't understand that silence, when chosen, is not surrender, it's a strategy. And what they mistook for compliance was actually the beginning of something they wouldn't see coming. I left that day without tears, without protest, without explanation, but I left carrying the one thing they thought they owned outright, their security. And now it sat in my lap, waiting. The call came the morning after I checked into the motel. I was halfway through my second cup of diner coffee, staring at a cracked sugar container, when an unknown number lit up my phone. I nearly let it ring out. Something in me said to answer. The man on the other end introduced himself as Brad. He worked for Carolina Equity Lending. He asked if I was Harper Price, co-owner of a property at 312 Maple Hollow Drive. My heart slowed. I told him yes. He cleared his throat, formal but not unkind, and explained there had been a default on a business loan. Apparently, Josh had taken out $95,000 against the house 6 months earlier. A marketing startup, Brad said. It had failed, payments hadn't been made. Warnings had gone unanswered. He told me foreclosure proceedings were scheduled to begin that Friday unless one of the owners resolved the debt. I sat perfectly still, staring through the window at nothing. He kept talking. Legal terms, options, amounts. I asked questions quietly, wrote everything down. My voice didn't shake, not even once. When he was finished, he offered to email the paperwork. I said yes. We hung up. I stared at my phone for a long minute, then opened my red folder and pulled out the original deed. There it was. My name, printed clearly. Not an emergency contact, not a guest. A legal co-owner. Josh had signed beside me, smiling that day, like he was proud to share something with me. That smile didn't mean much now. But the paper did. The email came within the hour. I walked to the motel's front desk and asked if they had a printer. They did. It jammed twice before spitting out the documents. I spread them out across the little table in my room like puzzle pieces. There was an option to pay the debt. There was also an option to release my claim and allow the foreclosure to proceed. I reached into my purse and pulled out a blue pen, the same one I used to sign Josh's kindergarten field trip slips. I signed every page slowly, without hesitation. Then I scanned and sent them back. Brad called again to confirm. He thanked me. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone. That night, I lay on the motel bed, the ceiling fan clicking above me, and held the folder against my chest. I wasn't angry. Not really. I wasn't vengeful. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted peace. And I wanted them to understand that I was not disposable. The next morning, I bought instant coffee and peanut butter crackers from the corner store. I ate slowly, sitting by the window, listening to the world move on outside. I didn't check social media. I didn't call anyone. I just sat with myself, breathing in the quiet that had been missing from my life for years. By Wednesday, I received a formal confirmation from Brad's office. The foreclosure was proceeding. The sheriff's department would be notified. I would not need to be present. I folded the letter and slid it back into the red folder, now thicker than ever. The weight of it in my lap felt steady, solid, like proof that I hadn't imagined the things they did to me. I didn't send a message. I didn't warn Josh. I didn't try to explain. I let them live inside the illusion that they had won, that I had slunk away, defeated and quiet. They believed their story was the only one being written. They didn't know. I had picked up my own pen. Every hour that passed, I imagined the walls of that house breathing heavier. I pictured the mail slot filling with letters they didn't open, the tension in the air when they finally noticed something was wrong. I didn't relish it. I didn't smile. But I didn't stop it either. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was just removing myself from the wreckage they created. And if it collapsed without me holding it up, That wasn't sabotage, that was gravity. I had carried the weight of their comfort for long enough. That afternoon, I took a walk around the block. The motel sat between a dry cleaner and a discount liquor store. I passed a dog tied to a pole, a kid on a bike, and a woman sweeping a stoop. No one looked twice at me. I wasn't someone's mum here. I wasn't a burden or an embarrassment. I was just a woman in a beige coat, with tired eyes and a new kind of freedom. They had lit the match the day they told me I didn't belong. All I did was let the fuse run. It started with a text. Josh, no punctuation, just a question. Did you cancel something with the house? I stared at it and let it sit there. A few hours later, another one. There's a letter taped to the door from some lender. Call me. Still, I said nothing. By that evening, Megan messaged. Her tone was frantic, too sweet. Linda, please, we're confused. Just tell us what's going on. I turned off the phone. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had too much. I needed the silence, more than I needed to be understood. The next day, the notice went up in full colour, bright orange, posted right on their front door. A formal foreclosure letter from the sheriff's department. I didn't see it myself. I didn't have to. Megan posted a panicked plea in the neighbourhood Facebook group. She said they were being targeted, said there must be some mistake, called it a scam and asked for recommendations for attorneys. I sat in my motel room with coffee that tasted like burnt paper and read the comments. Old co-workers, church ladies, parents from Josh's high school soccer team. Everyone chimed in. What happened? Can we help? Are you safe? Megan answered every single one like a press secretary. Long messages full of half-truths and vague trauma. She never once mentioned my name. Instead, she called it a betrayal, said someone close to them had weaponized legal documents, made it sound like they were victims of elder manipulation. People rallied around her, sent prayers, called her brave. I kept scrolling until I found Josh's reply, underneath one of her posts. He had shared an old photo of the two of us, me holding him at age 5, ice cream dripping down his wrist. The caption read, "It's hard when the people who raised you end up turning on you." No names, no tags. But everyone understood the message. I was being erased in real time. I thought about posting the deed. The email from the lender. The texts from Megan confirmed everything. I had proof. But then I remembered something my mother used to say. Don't argue with people performing for a crowd. You'll only become part of the show. So I didn't. Instead, I shut my laptop, made a sandwich, watched the sun dip behind the roof of the gas station across the street. I didn't need to prove I was right. I just needed to remember I wasn't wrong. That house was a gift they twisted. My silence wasn't guilt, it was survival. Every message they sent after that was more frantic than the last. Josh stopped asking and started accusing. Megan began using phrases like family destruction and legal cruelty. None of them admitted what they had done. They just doubled down on making me the villain. But I didn't answer. Not once. Not to defend. Not to explain. They had made their version of the truth loud and public. I would make mine quiet and immovable. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all, and let the noise echo around the empty space where your voice used to be. She showed up just after 2 in the afternoon. I was halfway through a peppermint tea, curled up in the motel chair, when I heard the knock. It was light, almost shy. I peeked through the peephole, and there she was. Megan. Her makeup was smudged, her hair pulled into a loose bun, and in her arms was a bundled-up baby, wrapped in a pink blanket. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said my name and asked if she could come in. Said they didn't know what to do anymore. Said they were lost. I cracked the door an inch. I could hear the baby fussing softly, That newborn sound that once would have stirred something maternal in me, but now it just sat there, like background static. I let her in. She walked slowly, like she thought one wrong step might make me change my mind. She glanced around the small room, gave a half smile, and said, "I still like it cold in here." I didn't answer. She sat on the edge of the bed, bouncing the baby gently. Said her name was Grace. Said she was mine, too. That part hit harder than I expected. I hadn't known the baby's name. I hadn't wanted to. Megan spoke in soft waves. Said they had failed a credit check at the rental, that their accounts were frozen, that she didn't know how to fix anything. She talked about fear, about how lonely it felt to be out of options. I listened, really listened, but something felt wrong. Her diaper bag caught my eye. I'd seen the brand before. Posh Baby. A luxury line. The tag was still hanging. The retail price is less than $1,000. I leaned in. Then I saw it. A phone, half tucked into the side pocket, lens angled just slightly up. Recording. I stood, quietly, carefully. She looked up. I asked where her phone was. She hesitated, said it was off. I nodded, walked to the bag and pulled it out. It was recording. Audio. Maybe video. I couldn't tell. I didn't care. I pressed stop. "You came here to bait me." Her face froze. "I came with receipts." Her mouth opened, then closed. She said it was just for protection, in case I twisted things. I stared at her, not angry, not yelling, just done. "Get out." She blinked, said something about Grace needing stability. I stepped forward. "Let me be clear. I am not your storyline. I am not your villain, and I am not your ATM. Get out of my room before I call the police." She stood slowly, adjusting the blanket around the baby. Said Grace was still my granddaughter. I looked her in the eye. "No, she's your child. Raise her better than you treat people." She walked out without another word, slid into the black SUV idling at the curb. I watched them drive away from the window. My hands were shaking again, but it wasn't fear. It was clarity. They hadn't come for healing. They'd come to spin a narrative, turn my silence into guilt. I had almost let them in. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote one line. They brought a baby to play victim. I brought receipts. Then I turned the page and started making a list. Names, places, documents. Not to retaliate, but to be ready. Because the next time they tried to rewrite my story, I'd already have it printed and sealed. The condo was smaller than I imagined, but it felt like it fit me perfectly. 2 bedrooms, 2nd floor, a narrow balcony with slats of sun cutting across the wood. I couldn't see the ocean from the window, but I could hear it when I left the sliding door open. That was enough. The air smelled different here, salt and pine and something cleaner, like space. I unpacked slowly, one drawer at a time, filling the kitchen with food I actually liked. No one rolled their eyes when I bought ginger tea. No one sighed when I used the stove too long. Silence had finally become a friend. On the 3rd day, I walked to the little market by the pier and bought 2 plants. Nothing fancy, just something green to sit on the windowsill. Then I bought a small ceramic bowl for my keys and a second-hand bookshelf that someone had painted seafoam blue. Everything I brought into that place had meaning. Nothing was for show. It felt good to make choices just for me. That weekend, I updated my will, took Josh's name off everything, split my remaining assets between a local women's shelter, a literacy non-profit, and the animal rescue I used to volunteer for. I didn't feel bitter doing it. I didn't even feel sad. It felt like setting things down after carrying them for too long. like breathing deeper for the first time in years. I didn't tell anyone I moved. I didn't post pictures or send out a change of address. The people who mattered would find me if they tried, and the people who didn't, I had finally stopped waiting for. Each morning, I made oatmeal with cinnamon and read by the window until the sun hit my shoulder. In the afternoons, I walked along the boardwalk with no destination, just space to move without apology. And at night, I listened to the waves until my mind finally stopped chasing old questions. This wasn't a new chapter. It wasn't a restart. It was a shift from surviving to choosing, from being tolerated to being free, not because someone gave me permission, but because I remembered I didn't need it. The knock came just before sunset. I had been sitting on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the light stretch across the floor. I didn't rush to answer. Something in my chest already knew. When I opened the door, there she was. Megan. Hair pulled back, face tired, holding the baby like a shield, and a question all at once. The little girl shifted in her arms and made a soft sound. Megan asked if she could come in, said they were out of options, said they were falling apart. I didn't move, just kept the door half open and waited. She started talking. Her voice was low, breaking in places. Said they got kicked out of the rental. Said no one would help them. Said Josh hadn't slept in days. I listened without blinking. She talked about regret, about fear, about how hard it was to be a parent with no safety net. She said she never meant for things to go this far. She just wanted to keep her family together. I looked down at the baby. Her name was Grace. Megan said again, like that would unlock something in me. It didn't. She asked if I could help them one last time. Not money, just advice. Or maybe a letter for the lender, anything that might slow things down. I asked her why she came to me now. She said, because I was the only one who ever really cared, that no one else had ever stepped up the way I did. I let her words sit there. Heavy. Too late. Then I said it. Raise her better than you treated me. Megan's face crumpled. Her lips parted like she had something else to say, but nothing came out. She just looked down at the baby and nodded. I stepped back without another word and closed the door. Not in anger, not to be cruel, but to be clear. I stood behind it for a long minute, my hand resting on the frame. I heard her footsteps retreat, heard the engine of whatever borrowed car they came in humming to life. I didn't watch them drive off. I didn't need to. There are lines you don't cross, even with family, and once you do, there's no simple way back. I wasn't shutting her out to punish her. I was doing it to protect myself. Because love without respect is just manipulation, and I had finally learned to tell the difference. That night, I slept with the window cracked. The ocean breeze rolled in, soft and steady. For the first time in months, I didn't dream about them. I dreamed of nothing. Just silence and peace. The email sat in my drafts for 2 days before I finally hit send. I had gathered everything. The deed, the bank transfer, the foreclosure notice, screenshots of messages, the photo of the designer diaper bag with the tag still on. I didn't add commentary, just facts. Just what happened, the subject line was short. Since they want to talk, let's talk. The editor responded the next morning. Her tone was calm but clear. She said she believed me. Asked if I'd go on record. I said yes, as long as they included one sentence at the top. This is not revenge. This is clarity. The article ran that weekend. 3 pages in the Charlotte Sunday Journal. Black and white photos. No drama, no embellishments. Just a quiet telling of how one woman gave everything and watched it unravel. They didn't sensationalize it. They didn't turn me into a headline. They let the truth sit in the room and breathe. It didn't go viral, but it didn't need to. People in town started whispering again. Not gossip, discussion. The same neighbours who had comforted Megan in her public posts began asking questions. Some of them messaged me privately, apologised, said they didn't know, said they never should have assumed. I didn't reply to most. I didn't need validation. I just needed space. And that space grew a little each day. I walked through the local farmers' market and noticed people looked me in the eye again. Not with pity, with recognition. The Facebook group that once echoed with Megan's panic began to shift. Posts about housing rights, about elder exploitation, about boundaries and consequences. My name didn't need to be mentioned. My story was already there, threaded through every comment that said, "Maybe we don't know the full picture." Josh never posted about me again. The silence was its own admission. Megan's account went private. The narrative they tried to control unraveled quietly, not with scandal, but with truth. It didn't take anger, just time and proof. I never set out to clear my name. I set out to find peace. But peace, I've learned, comes easier when the noise around you stops trying to define you. When the version of yourself you know is the one that others finally see. I didn't want justice. I wanted release. And sometimes they're the same thing, just spelled differently. One in the headlines, the other is how easily you can finally breathe. The new condo had sunlight in every corner. Mornings came with soft warmth across the floors and the sound of gulls in the distance. I didn't rush to decorate. I unpacked one drawer a day, hung just the pictures that made me smile, and left the rest in boxes. I liked the space. I liked the quiet. My phone stayed on silent, not because I was avoiding anything, but because I finally didn't feel like I had to be reachable. I stopped checking messages, stopped wondering if they'd call. Some bridges don't burn all at once. They crumble slowly, piece by piece, until you realize you're already on the other side. I went for walks by the boardwalk every morning. The ocean didn't roar. It whispered. A calm, steady rhythm that matched the pace of my new life. I stopped waiting for closure. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because I no longer needed it. The questions that once kept me awake at night had lost their sharp edges. One afternoon, I passed a small market stand where a woman was selling painted seashells. She smiled at me and said to pick the one that called to me. I chose a blue shell with silver edges. She said it was for people who had let go of something heavy. I carried it home in my coat pocket and placed it next to my keys on the kitchen counter. I called it Peace. I didn't answer the last message Josh sent. I read it once. Then I deleted it, not out of anger, out of acceptance. I had already said goodbye, just not in words he could hear. There was nothing left to explain. Some stories end without applause. Just the closing of a door and the deep breath after. I started attending an art class at the community centre. Nothing serious, just colours and quiet conversation. The instructor said I painted like someone who had survived something. I smiled. Because I had. Not with rage, not with revenge, but by simply walking away and choosing something better. Peace is not dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't arrive in a sweeping moment. It comes in the stillness, in the way the morning light hits the window just right, in the way you pour coffee slowly because no one is rushing you, in the quiet understanding that you do not owe anyone the pieces they tried to break. They said there was no space for me, and in the end they were right. But it turned out I never needed their space to begin with. I just needed my own. And now, I have it.